Once again, we are back with episode number 16 of Ramblers Radio. Thank you all so much for joining us. We are in for a big episode today. We are doing
Yeah.
another episode like some some of our biggest episodes are a bunch of rankings. But before we go ahead and get into that, make sure, quick show real quick, be sure to like the video and subscribe if you are new to the channel and if you are consistently enjoying. And if you're on Spotify, rate us 5 stars. It would help us out quite a bit. We're not going to get into much news. We will get into that later for a reason that I'll keep secret for now. But Code, are you ready to get this started?
Yeah, dude, I'm excited.
So,
We gotta keep each
yeah.
ranking kind of short today, guys, but it's gonna be fun regardless.
Yeah. So before we do this, if in case you guys don't know, well, you probably read the title already, but in case you don't know, we are ranking every single season of every single Star Wars series, or
That
at
we've
least
watched.
or at least the canon series. A couple of them that we're not including. We're not including Clone Wars 2003. We're not including Star Wars Visions. We're not including Resistance. Because if you can't watch them, you can't rank them. That's simple as that. So, yeah.
We're not putting the Lego ones in here, or Young Jedi Adventures because those are baby shows. But yeah,
yeah, for real. We're gonna rank them by fives, except for the first part. We're gonna rank them by four, so we can even we're gonna rank the first four so we can even them out. I personally rank them from bottom to top because
me
that's
too.
personally how I found it easier. Actually, no, what I did, I ranked the bottom part, and then I ranked the top part because the middle part was
Yeah,
the by far the toughest. I would say number 17 to number 10 was like really tough for me. And the point where like it was just divided into like the most like minimal differences and whatnot.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Honestly, for me, like everything 16 and above is good. Honestly, I would say 16 and above are all like actually good seasons. Um, but it was really hard ranking like 16 to 9 for me. Those were really, really, really difficult. And they're all, I could see an argument to have any of them anywhere in the middle. So we'll see how this goes. This should be pretty fun.
Yeah. All right. With that being said, I will go ahead and start out with my first four, 24 to through 21. At number 24, I have Tales of the Empire. Number
Yep.
23, I have The Acolyte Season 1. Number 22, I have Obi-Wan Kenobi. And number 21, I have Book of Boba Fett. This was by far for me personally, this was the easiest
Yeah.
part to rank. And I don't really see any reason why it wouldn't be easy. Just for starting, Tales of the Empire, why that is last place for me was because one, the stories in and of itself do not come from interesting concepts, nor do they become interesting from them. People wanted to see what happened to Barriss. I'm in the minority of I just didn't freaking care of what happened to her. She could just go be gone. And then the Morgan Elsbeth arc was fine, but as like the only thing that we really learned that was significant is that we learned of why Morgan Elsbeth is related to Thrawn, and that in and of itself isn't really something that we needed entirely. Maybe some people would say, yeah, I could be convinced to say, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They used Grievous as an advertising scheme, sadly, even though some people thought he would have a bigger part in the story. I don't know who would think that. Shout out to a couple creators, a couple popular ones. I won't name who, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Acolyte for me has only a couple saving graces. The best part for me was the fighting choreography. Outside of the mirror, outside of the freaking mirror match, just for the sake of being twins. Like the lightsaber choreography in this show is the best I've seen since for quite a while, since maybe Clone Wars animation. Like they did a very good job with the lightsaber choreography, in my opinion. It outmatches that of Obi-Wan as well as that, or maybe not so much Ahsoka, because Ahsoka has some really good choreography as well. But That's the main saving grace for me. Outside of that, uh, most of the characters are just not very compelling, nor are they very interesting, and I just don't really think the plot makes very much sense. Even though Disney is, of course, trying to expand in High Republic era because that is something that they themselves created. Now, here's a controversial one. I rank Book of Boba Fett over Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now, here's my basis in terms of ranking. Code knows me very well. I value consistency a lot higher than peaks, although not in this case, but although if shows are just as consistent or just as inconsistent as another, I will value peaks over that. I Even though Book of Boba Fett is inconsistent, it is not inconsistent of the way that I think the story is necessarily outright terrible. It's inconsistent as far as the focus on characters, which is why not a lot of people like it. And it's also why people think Book of Boba Fett ruined Mandalorian Season 3 in and of itself. A lot of people think Boba Fett's character is ruined. I really don't think so. Me personally, I would be a changed man after I survive a Sarlacc pit. I don't know. I don't know who else thinks that. Obi-Wan Kenobi to me it's a story that didn't need to happen. They kind of just bandwagoned off of the Cal Kestis Fallen Order idea, which is a good idea. I don't blame them because that's a good idea to follow with a Jedi after Order 66, but it's sort of a copied idea. It's full fan service. Some fan service can be done really well. This fan service I don't think was done tremendously. I don't think they focused on Vader enough until the very end, which to me feels like it can, and in some ways, and not feel like a rushed product towards that. But that's going to be the end of my 4. What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I would say I mostly agree with everything you say. I'm not gonna have too much to say here because we have the exact same 4, just in a different order. So my number 24 is Tales of the Empire, 23 is Acolyte, 22 is Book of Boba Fett, and 21 is Kenobi. So we just switched Kenobi and Boba Fett. As for Tales of the Empire, I think there's genuinely nothing to love in Tales of the Empire. There's nothing good in it. I am in the majority, and that I do think there was interesting story potential for Barriss. I think especially she was recruited by the Inquisitorius. She could have had some sort of interesting conflict with Vader, which I thought could have been really cool. But I think that was really quite a missed opportunity there. They really didn't do any of the characters justice, really. And then the Morgan Elsbeth story also felt pretty pointless. The big thing we learned, we learned how she got in contact with Thrawn, and then why Ahsoka's on the planet. Which, okay, we didn't really need to know either of those things. At least not. They didn't justify 3 episodes necessarily, in my opinion. So that's why that show is there. It feels sort of heartless. I don't really enjoy it. I'm never gonna rewatch it. 23 Acolyte, similar as to what you said. While this show is also quite terrible, I think the first 2 episodes were a decent setup. I think the choreography was the best we've seen. I think it's better than Clone Wars Season 7. I think it rivals the prequels, honestly. I think the choreography was done really, really well. It's sort of a good medium between the super flashy, crazy stuff of the prequels and more grounded combat. So that choreography and then Soul, I would say Soul's character is pretty decent, are the 2 things that hold that show up for me. Still pretty terrible, 23. 22. As anybody who knows me knows, I hate Book of Boba Fett. And I'm going to disagree with you here. I think they ruined Boba Fett's character. The reason I think this is because there's one thing if he came out of the Sarlacc pit a changed man. But there's another thing when he acts the exact same in The Mandalorian as he did in the original trilogy. He's ruthless.
Mm-hmm.
He kills a bunch of dudes. And then in his own show, he kills Bib Fortuna to sit on a throne looking like a badass. And then in his own show, he completely changes. I'd be fine if he was acting this way if there was development. If they developed it throughout the show and it made sense, that'd be fine. But I just really dislike the random character jump. With even if it is kind of implied, I don't think it was done well. And I think they kind of just made him less of an interesting character. They didn't use his newfound his newfound compassion to do anything compelling in the story. I think while the Mando episode is great, it takes away from season 3. It really makes it so to watch season 3, you have to watch Boba Fett, which is really bad, and Grogu's kind of gone for a little bit. The timeline's a little messed up, but it kind of invalidates the season 2 finale, in my opinion. I think this show is quite all over the place, and I think Kenobi, my next rank, is sort of in that same realm. Whereas it wasn't very good, but I think the peaks of Kenobi make it not really worth it. But I sort of forgive it a little bit. I think the finale is decent. That fight is not very great. I don't know what people talk about. The lighting is horrible. You can't see anything. Um, but I think the finale is decent. I think episode 5 is decent. Um, but there's so many bad moments. The show is not consistent. Like all the stuff with Leia, like running around, escaping 2 grown men through the forest, and the trench coat where she's like a giant cyst on his side. Like some horrible things in the show. A lot of copying of other projects like Fallen Order. I think this show didn't need to happen. We knew what was going to happen. Vader had to lose, and it was really just a product of fan service. And it's not. I'd say it's disappointing, but I don't know what you'd really expect from a show like this. So that's my bottom 4. Nothing too great.
Yeah, I personally think those are interchangeable. They're kind
Yeah.
of forgettable for me, not forgettable in a bad way for some people, but it
And
goes.
honestly, everything above these 20 to 1 are all like watchable. Like I'd rewatch them again. But these bottom
Yeah.
4, I wouldn't.
No. Okay. That goes the same. All right. So, number 20. This is where it definitely would get sort of interchangeable for some. For my next 5, number 20, I have Rebels season 1. Number 19, I have The Bad Batch season 1. 18, I have Mandalorian season 3. 17, I have Tales of the Jedi. 16, I have The Clone Wars season 1. So interchange these how you will. It doesn't really matter too much, but I do believe that the first 3 sort of do belong in a bracket. Rebel season 1, the main thing for me is that this definitely feels like a freaking kid show. Like they have they have sort of mature themes, but they sort of just branching off and like, oh, everything's gonna be okay. Like, no, this is these are dreadful situations that these people are coming in, but
Yeah.
then they sort of play it off in a way that it would deem as a kid's show, like some of the voice acting, even though it's good voice acting, it doesn't really appeal to other mature audiences, which is why Rebels was not extremely popular when it was airing back then on Disney XD. Even though Return of the Clone Wars and then the continuity aspects of it did make Rebels more popular over time. And the Bad Batch, even though it doesn't necessarily follow the same lens, it does follow that inconsistency. I gotta say, out of the Bad Batch season 1, 16 episodes in that season, I would say that like I enjoyed like 7 of them. Like they're like half of that season to me seems like it's just not worth watching. It does have
Yeah.
high peaks. The premiere of that show is like really really good. I really like
Yep.
the finale of this season. I think that the 2-parter, I think that's done really really well. And then the other ones, like the Braca episodes where they remove the inhibitor ships, those are really cool. You also have the Ryloth episodes, so that in and of itself. Mandalorian season 3. A lot of people think this season is outright terrible. I don't really see why. I mean, there's a couple episodes that are pretty boring to watch. Like the Coruscant episode is not very great. Because they end up killing Pershing at the end, and then that ends up the only purpose of that show is like, oh, this female that served Moff Gideon, like she's still out and about, y'all. Like if we knew Moff Gideon had escaped, we probably would assume that the others would escape too. And then there's also, the one with the Duchess and Duke, Lizzo and Jack Black episode. Say what you want about that, but there was a couple things that weren't needed in that episode, but to each their own. But the rest of the season I thought was pretty moderate. I think it was fine. I really like the finale of the season, and I really like their introduction to the Mandalore ruins. I just think that overall it's really cool. I don't really something that I don't really like is that I don't really like how they see how Din Djarin seems like significantly weaker than he did in Mandalorian season 2. A lot of people don't like that. A lot of people don't like how it seems like Bo-Katan basically became the main character. To each their own with that, but I do believe that even though they tried to branch her off, they do know that all in all, at the very end, they were gonna split in different paths, and how Din Djarin was gonna basically go into a retirement on Navarro. So whatever you would say about that, because he did complete the mission on restoring Mandalore. That's all he said he was gonna do, and then he was gonna go back and do his own thing.
Yep.
Other than that, Tales of the Jedi is basically a victim of quantity, I would say. I would say that everything that had to do with Count Dooku in this show was beyond spectacular. And the Ahsoka stuff was cool too, but I don't necessarily think it was needed. Like the first episode where we saw her grew up as a toddler, it was fine. Like we didn't need to see it. Like I don't really care to see it, but it's okay. And then the last episode of how she basically kills an Inquisitor in 3 moves. That's pretty cool to see. It was an epic moment for sure. But it's a victim of quantity in that sense, and even though I do believe that we did need to see why Count Dooku turned to the dark side. That's by far the most important part of the show.
Mm-hmm.
But all in all, I think that's pretty much it for it, and that's why it's this low. If the Ahsoka arc became more impactful in that sense, it would probably be top 10, maybe borderline top 10, but who knows for that. And then number 16, Clone Wars season 1. I watched this season recently. A lot of it's a pretty consistent season, but there isn't really any arcs or anything that put this season over the top. Like the main ones are like the Malevolence arc. There's Lair of Grievous, which is probably my favorite episode of the season, and then there's the Ryloth arc where they save that planet, and then Hostage Crisis. But all in all, there isn't anything that puts this season over the other seasons for me.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of yapping about them, but yeah, that's my next 5.
Yeah. So we also have very similar top 5s. There's one that you have that I don't have that's a little bit higher, but I will say mine. So my number 20 is Clone Wars season 1. My number 19 is Mando season 3. My number 18 is Rebel season 1, and my number 17 is Clone Wars season 2. Which season 2 will seem a little low to some people, but I'll 16? Get there. Oh yeah, my 16 is Tales of the Jedi.
Okay.
So number 20, Clone Wars season 1. So I'm not gonna have a lot of different things to say. I think it's decent. I don't think it's horrible. But I think
it's not a very.
I think there's good moments. It's not super memorable, and there's not necessarily anything stellar in it. I think the rookie stuff is decent. The Malevolence arc is okay. Ventress stuff is pretty good. Lair of Grievous is a good episode. But overall, this season doesn't stand out, especially compared to the other seasons. It really just doesn't compare, and the animation is very inconsistent. It's not good in the first place, and there's sometimes some certain episodes where it really dips, and it's just kind of a byproduct of probably rushed production. But I think this season it's watchable. I will rewatch it probably at some point. But I don't think it stacks up to the rest. Mando season 3. It's not outright terrible. It has its moments. I think the first three or first I think first three episodes before the Coruscant stuff is really good. Um, but I think it's sort of just degrades. It's not really one thing that's like bad about it. It's just sort of mid all around. The finale is decent. They made Moff Gideon kind of goofy, but it's all right. Grogu gets more development with his powers and his development. More development with his development. What am I talking about? Um, Gideon, yeah, kind of goofy, but they're setting up obviously Project Necromancer as they always like to do, and I think the finale is decent. I like that Grogu and Mando get a happy ending, and it sort of leaves the open ended for the movie. But yeah, this show really doesn't, or this season really doesn't stand out, especially when compared to season 1 and 2, which are both amazing. Um, Moving on, Rebels season 1. I like this season more than most people. I think it's a little underrated, but it's still not great. The animation is pretty bad here. Not in the sense that it looks horrible, but the actual movements and animations are really bad, super stiff. Um, it doesn't look great, especially coming off Clone Wars. It's quite the downgrade. The characters don't really do too much special in this season. I'd say the best one is probably Kanan in this season. The Grand Inquisitor is awesome, but there's a lot of really mid filler, especially in this season. But yeah, the stuff with the Grand Inquisitor is cool. The finale is really great. Um, I believe this is yeah. No, I think this season is okay, but it's below a lot of the others. 17, Clone Wars season 2. Now this one I think is genuinely a huge step up from season 1. I think there are some great things in here. There's Cad Bane stuff, which is really awesome. Ahsoka development, like with the lightsaber lost episode, that's really great. We get our introduction to Mandalore. We get stuff with Boba Fett, and we get the Geonosis arc, which I think are all really, really great. Um, I just simply the reason this is so low is I just think it doesn't stack up to the other seasons, and that's honestly just what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And lastly, my number 16 is Tales of the Jedi. I love the Dooku stuff, obviously. I don't think anybody dislikes the Dooku stuff. It's genuinely a 10 out of 10. All three episodes are amazing and they build up, but at the end of the day, it's only 45 minutes total. And regardless of how good those 45 minutes are, they're not really going to stack up to a big season that has good moments, good episodes. The Ahsoka stuff is good, but the first episode is kind of pointless, and the second and third episodes both show something we didn't really need to see, but it's nice to have, but nothing amazing. Um, and I just think the Dooku stuff really, really carries the show. And while it is good, just due to a lack of content, it simply can't be put over these other shows, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned a couple things, like, of course, Clone Wars Season 1 being that low. Like, of course, we're saying Clone Wars Season 1 is fine, but when you think of Star Wars The Clone Wars, which will forever be the most popular animated Star Wars show, nothing will eclipse it. Like, it has very, very great moments, and Season 1 is definitely the last season that you think of regarding that
Yep,
show.
definitely.
Yeah, a couple others. All right, we'll move on to my next five, 15 to 11. 15 for me, I have Clone Wars Season 2. 14, I have Ahsoka Season 1. 13, I have Rebels Season 2. 12, I have Clone Wars Season 3. And 11, I have Bad Batch Season 2. So you said a lot of things about Clone Wars Season 2 already because it's in your next five. For me, it has a lot of great moments, but this story still feels choppy because they decided to put some episodes that take place before the Clone Wars film, which I think is kind of a bad idea, but that's on them. Like, For example, this season features the Admiral Trench episode, which takes place before
Yeah.
Christophsis, and I'm just like, the way that they put the show in chronological order for me, it just doesn't. It's something that I kind of just dislike about it, but it doesn't affect it too much because nearing the later half of the Clone Wars, it's basically chronological as it is, so it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter a whole lot. But other than that, this season just doesn't really have the peaks to suffice that of even like every other season besides season one. Like for
Yep.
me, the highest peak of this season for me is probably the Zillo Beast.
Yep. I forgot to
And
mention that. Yeah.
there's also stuff like we're introduced to Mandalore in this season with Pre Vizsla and Satine. We have the Geonosis arc with the brain worms. Say what you will about that. The Cad Bane gets his arc, gets his entire arc in the beginning of the season. So for me, the show is consistent. There were many good parts about it, but the peaks just don't suffice high enough for every later season. Bad Batch season 2 is quite it's a lot more consistent than season 1, I would say. Like there are only a few episodes of the season where I genuinely feel like they were not needed. Like the only ones
Treasure
that I would
hunting.
the only other ones I would say is the one where they go treasure hunting. And say what you want about the crossing and retrieval, which is where they get their ship stolen by like by like hardworking kids or whatnot. But but
Shine
every other part of
workers.
the season, every other part of the season, I genuinely believe is worth watching. Say what you want about the episode of Tech Riot Racing. And there's also a couple fun other moments, like the Kashyyyk episode's really cool. The Coruscant episodes are beyond amazing. Going back to the Zillo Beast is incredible to see.
Hmm.
I just think that's beyond phenomenal. And I was kind of skipping. I was kind of skipping ahead. I skipped over to all the way to number 11. Other ones, Ahsoka season 1, I think is really consistent. A lot of some things that a lot of people don't like about this show was that they don't like about how Sabine has become a Jedi, which say what you want about that, but it doesn't like break canon in a sense of how every living being can use the Force. It's just a matter of focus and determination. Even though talent is a factor, they said everything about that in a show. That doesn't bother me. Not a lot of people like how the sort of Thrawn Peridia arc happened. A lot of people say that Thrawn's character was diminished in a way, or not diminished, but he was mainly like underused. But I also like to understand that he is in a dire situation about how he cannot get off this planet without the help of the night or the mother witches, not the night sisters, but he can't get off the planet without them. So and plus it's basically just a start for what we will see in the Heir to the Empire movie. It's basically just a small glimpse of what we see, which is what I really like about it.
Yep.
Everything else, I think Ahsoka's character is done really well. The development that she has specifically in the middle, even though it does seem like it was kind of like rushed in a way, maybe because it's basically her whole character development basically happens in one episode, and that's of course Shadow Warrior. But say what you want, but I think it's still done really well regardless, whether or not you think it's rushed or not. And yeah, Morgan Elsbeth is fine. She's an okay villain. Baylan Skull, I think, is a very well done character. We still don't know what's going to happen to him in season 2, but only time will tell. We still have a long time before season 2 actually becomes a thing. And then yeah, that's pretty much all my thoughts about that. The only other thing I have here is Rebel season 2. Uh, Rebel season 2 is a much more mature season than Rebel season 1. It definitely Something that I really like about this season is that it dips into more concepts about the Force. We see Rex's return, which is so cool to see. It's a lot of fan service for Clone Wars fans, but I think it's done really well in the sense of how they don't ruin characters and don't like break up the story really much. Like they bring back Rex. Ahsoka has a big role in the season. There are some parts that make this season feel a little bit choppy, but the peaks, of course, Twilight of the Apprentice, of course, is universally recognized by most as the best episode of the season. And then there's, of course, the Jedi Temple episode, Shroud of Darkness. But outside of that, there isn't really anything that stands out too much besides those, which is why I would have that at number 13. And then number 12, Clone Wars Season 3. This season is where I believe we are stepping up into like the meat of the bone in the Clone Wars personally. Some arcs that are featured, if I can look back, the Camino defense arc, really cool to see. Only other ones, there are a couple episodes in the season that are very forgettable and we didn't need to watch, but we got introduced to the Night Sisters. The Mortis arc is in this season, really cool to see. The Citadel arc. I think the peaks for this season are just stepping up between 1, 2, and 3,
Yep.
and this is the season where the highest peaks of the Clone Wars are starting to show, but it's just not as
Yeah.
consistent as the other ones later.
Yeah.
And then, of course, my number
Absolutely.
11 is Bad Batch Season 2, which I already talked about. So,
Yeah. Yeah, great picks there. I like those. Pretty similar to yours again. My number 15 is Ahsoka. My number 14, or sorry, no, my number 15 is Bad Batch Season 1. My number 14 is Ahsoka. My number 13 is Clone Wars Season 6. My number 12 is Bad Batch Season 2. And my number 11, people are going to crucify me, is Rebels Season 4. So, starting first with Bad Batch Season 1 at 15. I put this a couple places higher than you, but I simply believe that the storytelling in this season is really great. Despite the fact that there's lots of filler in this, I think that there's like a really good overarching story, which is something I think it actually does better than season 2, which we'll talk about later. I think the story, like just the overlying story of the Batch trying to survive and Crosshair hunting them down, is really good, and that's shown really well through the premiere episode, the Baraka episodes, and especially the finale. The finale is really, really good. This is the best finale in Bad Batch, in my opinion, where the Batch all comes together for the last time in the show, really, and it's done really well. The stuff with Crosshair, like when he saves Omega, and the fact they all have to work together. I think it's put aside their differences. I think it's really, really great. That being said, it is this low because the filler is here and it is huge. I'm not usually the type of guy to always call filler. Um, I think if an episode develops the characters in a way that leads to another episode, I think it's fine. If they gain something that'll help them later, it's not really filler. But a lot of these season 1 episodes are filler. They go on a mission for Sid and they come back, and that's really it. And I think that's really disappointing, and I think other seasons really step it up. So my 14 is Ahsoka, which I think is a very underrated show. There's not really a solid consensus in the fan base whether this is good or not. People sort of flip flop, but I believe this is really good. I think say what you will about the Sabine getting force sensitivity or whatever, becoming a quote unquote Jedi, even though they say in the show, I'm not trying to make her a Jedi. She's trying to make her be more of herself. Like she's not trying to force anything, but just bring the innate abilities that are in her out. I think it was done perfectly well. They explain it in the show. And the funny thing is, if this was done in any show, imagine if they did this in Acolyte. If they did this in Acolyte, people would be very, very mad. But, our Lord and Savior Dave Filoni, so it's fine. Um, Ahsoka, I think her arc is really great, even if it really is just in episodes 4 and 5. I think her arc is really great. I think it is a little silly that they go all the way, they leave to another galaxy to go save Ezra, and then they have Ezra go back and then them stay. I think that's a little goofy, but it's all right. I think it'll serve us well
Yeah,
later going into the
that's
movie
definitely a
and further
Disney moment right
series.
there.
Yeah.
That's definitely a Disney
Um,
thing.
I think it'll go. I think it'll play well. I think Shadow Warrior and Episode 4, I forget the name, really really great episodes. I think the show is overall very slept on, and it's very good. Even if it's not just an Ahsoka story, I think it's very good. And then my number 13 is Clone Wars season 6, which is a little low for a lot of people. And I love this season. This is where the seasons get good, in my opinion. Um, and well, they get good starting at season 3 going on, but this season I think is just a little short, similar to season 7, which is a lot higher. I think the Clone Conspiracy arc is great. The Yoda arc is great, but the banking arc and the Mace Jar Jar arc is kind of mid. They're not horrible,
It's goofy.
but it's
Yeah.
it's kind of mid. The banking arc is not very great. I mean, we get to see Clovis again. Ooh, cool. Um, not great. The Mace Jar Jar arc, it's a little bit better, but it's not great either. I think they sort of wanted to finish out Mother Talzin's story because they didn't think they were going to be able to continue the series. So they should sort of put this out there to be like, this is how Mother Talzin dies, even though that's not really how it happens. Um, I think the fight between her and Mace was pretty cool. But other than that, not really a super memorable arc. So I think it's really just half bad, half good, and kind of short. So I think this has to be lower, unfortunately. But if it was just Yoda and conspiracy, this could be higher, honestly. My next up is Bad Batch season 2, which I think is a huge step above season 1. I think the animation is much better. We get development for characters that had zero development in season 1. They really worked on all the criticisms. Echo gets development, Tech gets development, Crosshair gets development. He had development in season 1, but Crosshair's arc is great. But I think the main thing that lacks in this season is a consistent through story, which I think season 1 has. I think this season is kind of all over the place. There's not really an overarching theme. That being said, the episodes are much better in this season. The clone episodes, the where they get their ships stolen, not great, but every episode in the season has development for characters, except maybe the treasure hunting episode. I don't think the finale is as good as the other two, but I still think it's pretty great. Tech's sacrifice is pretty great. Um, and I don't have too much negative to say about the season. Think it's just worse than season 3, and it lacks sort of a story. And but other than that, I think it's quite great. Um, and my last one, my controversial one, is Rebel season 4. Um, People are gonna hate on me for this. I love Rebel season 4, um, but I like seasons 2 and 3 more. Season 4 for me, everything in Lothal is amazing. The second half of the season is amazing, but the first half of the season is kind of mid. Not gonna lie. The stuff on Mandalore is good, but nothing too special. The stuff on, I think it was done better in season 3. The stuff on Saw Gerrera is it's all right. It's good. But I think the show really, really shines when we get to Lothal and when we have like the 10 episode stretch or whatever where we're just on Lothal getting stuff done. I think it's really, really great. But unfortunately, I don't think it measures up to the other seasons, besides, of course, season 1. But the peaks of this, the consistency of the Lothal, I guess you could call it arc, is really great. The stuff with Kanan, the stuff with Ezra, the whole group really. I think it's done really well. Amazing finale. I just personally, especially because that first half isn't quite as good. I don't think it stacks up to some of the other projects on this list.
Yeah. Our only big disagreement, I would say, is that you have Bad Batch season 1 a lot higher than I do. And I only ranked it so low because the story just feels extremely choppy, and
Mm-hmm.
plus, like, there are really only 3 characters that have development out of the 6 main ones, and
Mm-hmm.
I really don't believe I just don't like my stories that way. If you're
Yeah.
gonna enlighten these characters so high, are you not gonna grow them? It's
Where'd you
whatever.
put season one again? Where'd you put season
I
one?
I put it at 19.
Okay, yeah. So we were like 4 spaces away. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Well, that's the first half. Getting into our top 10. But first, we're gonna bring back a segment that hasn't been in a couple episodes. Let's
Oh
get
no.
into smoke screen.
Okay.
All right. Welcome to smoke screen. Oh gosh, we're not doing that. Welcome to Smokescreen, where I tend to ramble on about Star Wars topics that I tend to be kind of bewildered and mad about. First thing, this is something that Code and I mentioned last night while we were filming the short segment of this episode. It has been first confirmed by Collider that the Lando series has officially been canceled.
No.
Which that's not the thing that I'm necessarily upset about. I had zero hope for this show because there was no news about it. Last time we said they interviewed Donald Glover about it at some point, and he said, "Oh, it's still happening. It's still happening. We haven't done anything, but it's still happening, guys. Trust." Um, and then something that Collider said was that the Lando series has been officially shelved despite development on it. So they started it, and then they realized that, oh god, guys, this might not be a good idea. This might not make us a lot of money, so they shelved it for good. And a couple other sources are saying, for some reason under the sun, they're saying that the Lando series has been shelved, but the Lando movie is happening. Brother, this is news to me. A Lando movie and a Lando
What?
series, like, this is okay. First off, this Lando show. I mean, no disrespect to Donald Glover. I think you're great. This would be the most. This would have been the most least popular series of any of them, and it's because Lando, with all due respect, you're a boomer, bro. I gotta keep it about, like, the new gen. They don't care about the original trilogy's characters outside of Luke like that. I gotta say, like, and plus, it's based off of a character off of a movie that did not do well in the box office. So even though Star Wars fans would have been like, "Oh, we're so sorry, your movie was actually good," they're not. It's still not going to make a lot of money because a lot of people just didn't watch it, or if they didn't, they just had a stain because they don't like what Ryan Johnson did with the Last Jedi. And then another thing, I this is news to me that they made development because, like, a couple months earlier, couple months ago, there was just multiple reports that said that no development has been made. So all of a sudden, development is gotten made, and then they just shelve it after a couple months of development. That to me just makes no sense, and that's why I think it's pretty upsetting, even though I didn't really have faith in the show to begin with. What do you think about that? What do you think?
Yeah, dude. We heard this show was announced in 2020 at the earnings call where all the shows got announced, and we heard nothing of it since 2020. Really, nothing big. So I wasn't expecting much. I assumed it had been canned already. Um, but yet there's not much of a market here for a Lando story, especially since you can't really use Billy D. Williams since he's like 90. Billy D. Williams is Lando. Okay, I'm sorry. When I see Childish Gambino, I don't think of Lando. I'm keeping it a buck. I'd be open to it, but I don't need a Donald Glover show of Lando, and I don't think a lot of people would watch it. These new gens are prequel purists, and they will watch nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
That being
That
said,
anything that has to do with Shing lightsabers and Push Force. That's
Hmm.
why they didn't watch Andor, but
Exactly,
we
because
did.
it's stupid. But they didn't watch Andor, but they like the politics of the prequels. That makes sense, right? So yeah, honestly, not too much thoughts. I already assumed that this show was gonna be canceled, and
Yeah.
it happened. So cool.
There's not much to be upset about outside
Yeah,
of people that really like Lando character. I think Lando's a good character. I don't
yeah,
necessarily think he was
it's
the
not bad.
greatest in Solo. I think he was probably one of my least favorite ones because Donald Glover's Lando seems like a polar opposite compared to Billy D. Williams' Lando for some
Yeah.
reason under the sun.
Yeah, Donald Glover's Lando
Yeah,
is like really he's really like childish and weird. Like he's not
really
cruel like Billy
nonchalant.
D. Williams. He
Yeah,
he's honestly less nonchalant. Like he tries to act nonchalant so bad that he's not nonchalant. It's annoying. It's like, and he has like some sort of weird romance with his droid. Like, bro, what are you doing? You're Lando Calrissian, bro. You're better than
and
this.
plus and plus Billy D. Williams can naturally like act a charming character.
Yeah,
Uh, Donald Glover, no disrespect, but you can tell that he's acting in a charming way.
yeah,
Billy D. Williams, it just comes natural to him. That's why he fit the
yeah.
character so well. And this one, I just don't really. That's why I didn't really see much of a potential because of all those reasons that I said. So,
Yep.
all right, well, that's going to be in the smokescreen. Let's get back into our rankings.
Okay. Top 10.
Top 10. This is the nitty gritty.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
This is where they're really good. These are really good seasons.
Yeah, starting at I think all of these are really good. Starting at I believe number 7 is where I believe the seasons start getting like great. But some of them have inconsistencies. I'll say them as they come. Number 10, I have Rebel season 3. Number 9, I have The Clone Wars season 6. Number 8, I have The Bad Batch season 3. Number 7, I have Rebel season 4, and then number 6, I have The Clone Wars season 7. So let's get into from the bottom and work our way to the top. Rebel season 3. This show just keeps Dave Filoni just gotten like more and more consistent with the show when this started airing. He started exploring Ezra's temptation with the dark side, which was really cool. Sabine finally gets development. A couple more episodes centered on Zeb, even though Zeb got a centered arc for him mainly in season 2 when they went back to Lasan. That was probably one of my favorite ones of season 2 that I forgot to mention before, but I will go ahead and mention now for the respect of it. But he kind of got the goofy one. He kind of just had an episode where he stopped an assassin droid like nonchalantly from blowing up their rebel base with Chopper.
Yeah.
But we go to Dathomir, the ghosts of Night Sisters. That's really cool. We get introduced to Thrawn, which is the highlight of this season. Thrawn's introduction to live action was the very first episode, and then the Bendu is also another cool thing. I really wish we get to see more of Bendu, maybe in Ahsoka season 2. That's my hope personally, is that we get to see more of him, because outside of Rebel season 3, we have not seen any of him, despite him being a very mysterious and really it's like the world of between worlds. This is what I appreciate about Rebels the most. They have introduced so many mysterious concepts and worlds and like characters,
They're
and
not afraid to do new things.
that only have the potential to be branched on so much, but not enough to where they're completely solved. I think the Bendu is one of those to where he's just the middle part. As I said, we have the last Clone Wars battle, quote unquote, which I think was a really fun episode. A lot of episodes in this season are just either really cool, really high peaks, or they're just really fun episodes. Only other ones that I didn't really care for. There's one called Iron Squadron, which is about like
Yeah.
it's definitely a Disney XD type episode.
That's low key the
Uh,
worst episode of the show.
they go to Geonosis, which I thought was really cool. Trials of the Darksabers, one of the best episodes of the show. Ezra trying to help out Agent Callus, that's another highlight of this season. Like there are so many parts of this season that just raise the peaks of Rebels. I just think season 4 for me personally is just slightly more consistent, which is why I have it at number 7 instead of number 10. I don't really know why I put it at a 3 number gap, but I could say that the list is fluid enough for it to be interchangeable. Clone Wars season 6 is my number 9. You had it a little bit lower, but for me, I personally value a couple things that I don't believe you mentioned of the season. The Sifo Dyas episode was so impactful for what it was because we're nearing the end of the Clone Wars. The next season is where the Clone Wars literally ends. And they finally figured out that Dooku was responsible for the creation of the clone army. That, to me, is pretty significant, specifically after even the beginning of the season where we have the Fives, the inhibitor chip arc, where there's literally a clone trooper that finds out the plot to kill the Jedi, and then it just gets covered up because, of course, plot armor. Revenge of the Sith has already happened. Spoiler alert. So that's it. As you said, the stuff about Clovis I don't care about, specifically because we hadn't seen him in season 2, and then all of a sudden he just pops up, or no, season 3, and then all of a sudden he pops up again. I just don't think he's an interesting character. And then the Jar Jar stuff I think is just extremely goofy. Mother Talzin shows up out of nowhere. It's like It's kind of weird. Even though the Mother Talzin Mace Windu fight's really cool, I really like to see that. It just didn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Yeah. And then the Lost Ones, that's of course where they find out the Sifo Dyas plot, and then the Yoda, I guess it's called the Realization arc, or like the Yoda Force arc. That's a top 5 arc in the show, like bar none. Like I think it deserves that credit.
It's amazing.
Hearing Qui-Gon again was really cool. I just don't think I would. Let's see. I rank this as the 4th best season of the show, only ahead of the first 3, of course. I just don't think there's just a little chop in the beginning, in the start, that has the Clovis and then the Jar Jar Queen Julia arc. But other than that, the other parts of this season I think are some of the best peaks in the show that we've seen. The Bad Batch season 3, by far my favorite season of the show. I know you agree with me on that. This is the second season that we watched party together outside of Ahsoka. I thoroughly enjoyed the season a whole lot. There were only a couple of things. One, I think the start of the season was just slightly slow. I wasn't really a huge fan of the first episode where we kind of just explore Tantis and like what Omega's life is like. Spending a whole episode on that, I just kind of like, whatever. They find out past the Hemlock experiments on a different planet, discovering deserted cadets. I think that was a nice touch. The Palpatine episode where they escaped Tantis, I think was really cool, even though that's sort of, plot armor because, all of a sudden, Omega has a high M count, guys. It's just kind of a Disney moment for me, but yeah. Everything between Hunter and Crosshair in this season, I think, was really cool. Even though Tech is gone, his presence is still felt to a high degree, which I really like, because the Bad Batch in and of itself doesn't seem like a full squad without one of the members. It's just a flaw that they've had throughout the entire show. They've always, ever since the premiere of the show, they've seemed like they've always have been missing a member, or even 2, because Echo's been gone for a couple stints. So yeah, I really like to hear that. And then the highlights of the show for me are the episodes 6 and 7, where they group up with Rex and his guys, and they sort of and everything with Wolf, I think, was cool. Even though I do wish Wolf was in the season a bit more. Even though we do have the new animated show coming up, that'll be cool. And then I think the finale was really great. Something that I think was kind of weird is that Rampart just shows up out of nowhere. Like they just kind of all of a sudden they need Rampart's help to find Tantis, even though I think it makes sense. It was just kind of out of the blue. But I think this season just is more consistent. The only other thing is that Ventress showed up for one episode and she kind of did nothing. Like she kind of just showed, oh yeah, you have potential to be force sensitive, but you probably don't want to do it because then the Empire will want you more. So it's just like, other than that, I think it's a really good season. By far my favorite of the show. Rebel season 4. Rebel season 4, I think, is the season where Ezra mainly, kind of Sabine too because of the beginning, but Ezra mainly is where he comes into his own as like the independent Jedi, especially after, Jedi Knights. For me, the highlights, World
Yeah.
Between Worlds, like that broke the Star Wars world when that episode aired. World Between
Yeah.
Worlds, hearing all of those, hearing all that dialogue from different films, that literally broke Star Wars internet. I remember the day that happened. I don't want to load the episode up though. And then I think the finale did really well. Great setup to bring these characters to live action. There's not really much to say other than you have said. I just think it was so consistent. The themes, the themes, the character buildings, the world buildings, everything
Yeah.
with Lothal was really good. That's all I really got to say about that. And then Clone Wars season 7. A lot of people are going to be surprised that I don't have Clone Wars season 7 in top 5. Everything about Mandalore, of course, it's unanimously recognized that Mandalore is the best arc in the series, bar none. But outside of those last 4 episodes, there's nothing there's nothing outstanding about this season. I mean, there is the Bad Batch arc. It's really cool that we come back to the show after 8 years time, and we get introduced to this new side of clone troopers that thinks so differently compared to them, and it ends up setting up to their next animated show, the Bad Batch. But it's nothing tremendous. There's nothing groundbreaking about it outside of Echoes Alive, which we knew if you knew the past Bad Batch arc. But then the Martez sisters arc is just something that I don't think made sense. It had to set up with the Siege of Mandalore because we knew Ahsoka was part of that. But to set it up like this, just to me, was just so strange. The plot
Yeah.
didn't really make sense. There's an episode where they start the episode in prison and then they end the episode back in prison.
Yep.
So it's like to each their own of that. Outside of the Mandalore arc, which is beyond perfection, it's the best it's probably the best continuative story that we've heard in Star Wars. Probably the best one. But outside of that, there's nothing about this season that's necessarily memorable for me, and that's why it's just outside of my top 5.
Yeah, dude. If you disagree that Siege of Mandalore is the best arc, you're wrong because it just is. Um, okay, my top 10 or my 10 to 6. Um, Similar to yours, I have some quite a bit higher than you do. It's a little different. Okay, my 10 is Clone Wars season 3. My 9 is Bad Batch season 3. My 8 is my 8 is Rebel season 2. My 7 is Clone Wars season 7, and my 6 is Mando season 2. So, starting at number 10, Clone Wars season 3. I believe it is a little higher for me than it is for you. I have it a little bit over season 6 just because there's more content and the stuff that is in this season is really, really great. This is where the show really catches its stride. And while I think the peaks of this are great, I think the Mortis arc is really good. The Camino stuff is decent. The Knight Brothers stuff was really cool as well. Quinlan Voss is in this. He's cool. Chewbacca. And then Savage Opress, I think, is a huge highlight of this. And we get our sort of reintroduction to Maul, which is really cool that they're throwing that idea around in the
That's
season.
season 4.
No, but they reveal him in season 3.
They revealed him though. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it took them a while to actually put him into the finale of season 4, which is kind of weird, but yeah, I think this season sets up for bigger and greater things, and I think especially with the animation starting to catch up, starting to look a lot better, I think that really helps this. Great arcs, great storytelling, and I think it's a bit more consistent in season 6. That's why it's above it for me. Bad Batch season 3 is in my 9. You said a lot of the things I wanted to say. I think this season takes the best of season 1 and season 2 and puts them together. I think it has the overarching story that season 1 has, but better. And I think it has the character development that season 2 has. And I think it just puts them together, and it's really, really great.
Yeah.
There's development for basically all our characters. Um, some great episodes. I think, episodes 7 and 8, the ones with the other clones and Wolf and Rex, are good. I think the finale is really great. I like that they sort of did it on their own. Everybody expected them to get Rex, and it's going to be a huge clone revolution thing, and that would have been cool. And they even planned to do that at the start of the episode. But I think it's much better the way it panned out as the Bad Batch. Um, yeah, the stuff with Crosshair and Hunter here is really great. Where this season kind of lacks for me, though, is the middle. And by the middle, I mean the 2 episodes. I think it's episodes 8 and 9,
I
which
can
is
pull that up for you.
The Fennec
You're talking
Shand
about
episode.
bad territory. Yeah.
It's the Fennec Shand episode and the Ventress episode. This season
Yeah.
starts off very strong. I think episodes 1, 2, 3 are great. I think 4 is how they get back to the batch. It makes sense. 5, it's their first mission together again. And then 6, 7, they're with the clones. And then 8 and 9 just grind to a halt. All the speed, all the
Mhm.
momentum is completely stopped. They do a fetch quest for Fennec Shand, that she might give them information if they do it. And then they send Ventress over in the next episode, and she's just there to be like, yeah, she has a high M count. Yeah, that's it. And then
Yeah.
she leaves.
Yeah.
And it seemed sort of a waste of Ventress, and it sort of makes her novel confusing. Not that I read her novel, but what are you going to say?
What's disappointing the most about it is that she was the grand reveal at the end of the official trailer of this season.
Yeah.
And then she has such a minimal role. She's only in one
Yeah.
episode. And she's not
Yeah.
she's like the least important like main character, so per se, or supporting character I'd say of the plot of the season. It's
Yeah,
just like
it
one
was it
minute.
was it was very silly. She was just a catalyst to transfer the information that Omega's Force sensitive. And for a character that started Star Wars animation, even back in Clone Wars 2003, I mean, she's a character that's an icon of this, and it could have been a great way to wrap it up, having the character that sort of started the Clone Wars in here, having sort of more of a major role. I think that would have been cool, but disappointing. So those 2 episodes in the middle really grind this episode down, and then it sort of starts picking
Mhm.
it back up again at episode 10. But I think that's really disappointing. Going back to the start of the season, I sort of disagree with you. I like the first episode because it checks us in with Omega and Crosshair, and then the second episode checks us in with Hunter and Wrecker, and then episode 3 sort of when it starts to converge. And I think if we didn't have episode 1, we wouldn't really get the context of when Omega is in the prison with the kids and how the rest of the prison works.
Mm.
And I think it makes the finale much better, seeing sort of what it's like, what life is like in there. Um, this show, especially in the beginning, it's very clear that this is the downfall of the Bad Batch. This is like the end of their story. At the beginning, it's literally just Hunter and Wrecker, which is crazy. Um, and I think the show is very beautifully done. I like that they sort of got a happy ending. Very good. Moving on. My number 7 is Rebel Season 2, which I have above Season 4 because me personally, I think um, I think they're about equal, and I can see an argument for either. But I think season 2, I think the animation is much improved from season 1, and we get some great episodes. The Siege of Lethal episodes, stuff with Hondo. We get Hondo. We get the Zeb arc and the stuff with Callus, and the Jedi Temple episode, and not to mention Twilight of the Apprentice, which is in my top 5 episodes of all time, part 2 at least. Um, it's a really great season that steps it up, and I think it develops these characters really well, and it sets Rebels aside from being in the shadow of Clone Wars, despite having Clone Wars stuff, which sounds kind of contradictory. It includes more stuff from Clone Wars, but it also sets itself out as a unique show, which I really, really enjoy. This is just a personal thing. I just really like season 2. So that is why it's at my number 8. And my number 7, Clone Wars season 7. This is also lower than a lot of people would put it. Again, it's 12 episodes, 3 arcs. And the first 2 arcs are not in my top 5. The Bad Batch arc I think is really good. It's in my top 10 for sure. I don't think it's in my top 5. The Bad Batch arc is good. There are really great things to love there, but I think there could have been. I think they should have done the Son of Dathomir arc personally, because Maul kind of just shows up again with no explanation. It would have
That's
made
right.
sense
Yeah.
if they sort of adapted the comic instead of shoehorning in characters so they can make a spin-off show. But it's okay. There was probably time constraints, and it makes sense. They put it in there so they can get these characters in a spot for their own show. I don't hate the arc. I just wish there could have been some Maul intro too. Martez sisters, it's a horrible arc. They spend 3 episodes in the prison, which is just, oh my god. And the sisters are insufferable characters. But Ahsoka's arc is decent. She like, I'm not a Jedi, but I can be a good person, basically. Um, and it sets up for Siege of Mandalore. But this season is so carried by the Siege of Mandalore. Probably the single greatest stretch of content from Star Wars hard stop. I
Yeah.
mean, the Siege of Mandalore, you can look on IMDb. Every episode has either a 9.9 or a 9.8. Everybody loves these episodes. They are
That's right.
perfect episodes, in my opinion. Um, Amazing voice acting, amazing animation, amazing storytelling, amazing pacing. Everything is just so perfect in each of these episodes. It is so good. And you feel the looming doom of the end of the Clone Wars through the whole arc. It's never like happy. Even the moments that are like classic Clone Wars, you can feel the undertones. You can feel that like something's about to happen the entire time
Right.
until episode 3. It's really, really good. Um, I don't. I can't say enough about Siege of Mandalore, but everyone else has already talked about that. So just know they're perfect, perfect episodes. That fight, by the way, is the best fight in Clone Wars. Probably the best in animation too. Really, really good.
Right. Yeah.
Um, they did mocap with yeah, awesome. Okay, moving on. My number 6 is Mando season 2, which is a little low for some people, I think. But Mando season 2, in my opinion, is a step down from season 1 for sure. I think, yes, this season's peaks are the best of the show. Um, it's not nearly as consistent. Well, it's consistent, but I think the consistency isn't necessarily good. This season is where the Mandalorian repetitiveness starts. It goes, the episode starts, I need to get to this person, so I go to this person to get information how to get to that person, but they tell me to go do something so they can give me the info. I go do the thing, I get the info, and then rinse and repeat for the next episode. And while I think the episodes are well done, each episode is very good. It's kind of the same episode a lot of the time. I think episode 1 is really good. Episode 2 isn't bad, but it's just a bridge. And then it's sort of just cameo after cameo after cameo. And while it is very well done, it is sort of repetitive. We get to see our intro to Ahsoka, to Bo-Katan. It sets up a lot of things. We get Boba Fett, Fennec Shand, all this great stuff. My opinion, my personal favorite episode of the season is actually episode 7, where it is the least cameo heavy. And it's more so the characters developing, which I think is really great. The finale is the greatest of the show. I mean, if you were online during that finale, it was insane. Star Wars has never been more united than when this season was coming out. Um, it's a great season. I kind of dogged on it a little bit, but it's phenomenal. There's a reason it's number 6. It's really, really good. Great fan service done right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's our 6, and it is now top 5 time.
We're doing it.
It is top 5 times. So, number 5, I have The Clone Wars Season 4. Number
Yep.
4, I have The Clone Wars Season 5. Number
Yep.
3, I have Andor Season 1. Number 2, I have Mandalorian Season 2. Mandalorian Season 1, sorry. And then number 1, I have Mandalorian Season 2. Starting from the bottom at number 5, Clone Wars Season 4. This has this rivals some of the peaks in the show altogether. Some of the biggest highlights. We have the Umbara arc in this season. We have the Obi-Wan undercover arc in this season. We have the Night Sister massacre, and
Yep.
we have Darth Maul's grand return in this season.
Yep.
Those to me are the 4 highlights. The only other ones, like, I don't care much of the Water War arc. I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's cool to see an underwater battle, but like the story in and of itself, like, did we need to hear it? Not really. It was a cool addition. I don't mind it, but yeah. There was the Naboo episode where Jar Jar impersonates the new boss, which was so goofy, but it's fine, I guess. It shows how the Gungans were able to take down Grievous, which I think was really cool. But then it ended up being to no avail. There's an episode where R2 and 3PO enter a foreign world with foreign languages with Commander Wolf. That's just kind of a weird thing. But other than that, I mean, there's the Zygerian arc, which was fine. But the only other ones were, the main 4 that I said, the Umbara arc,
Yeah.
Obi-Wan undercover as Racco Hardeen, the Night Sister massacre, and Darth Maul's return. I think all of those are like 9 out of 10 like segments of
Yep.
the season that they make up like 12 episodes out of the 22 that are in this season. And I just don't really. I only think there's like 1 or maybe 2 episodes that are like not worth watching at all. And I just think the peaks, like Umbara is a top 5 arc. Darth Maul's return, it's like it doesn't suffice enough to be like a 4 episode or 3 episode arc, but I think it's like a top 5 like stint. Night Sister Massacre is really cool, and then Obi-Wan Undercover for me is also a top 5 arc because it expands on Cad Bane and his sort of intellect of like trusting and mistrusting like different bounty hunters, which was really cool to hear. That's why I value the season so high. I just think it's a lot more consistent than, of course, season 7, not only in quality, but of course, it's much more quantitative. But then the best season of the Clone Wars for me is season 5. We see it starts off. There's a episode where Maul tries to recruit pirates, like whatever. That's kind of just there. It was only a 1 episode thing. It was a cool episode, but it wasn't really sufficient enough. There's the Onderon Rebels arc, which is like an original. It's like an original trilogy themed like arc inside the Clone Wars, which I think was so cool to see. I think it was so deserved. Say what you want about Lux's relationship problems with Saw's sister and Ahsoka. That to me was extremely goofy, but I kind of looked past it. It was actually Saw Gerrera's debut in Star Wars. It wasn't Rogue One. It was actually in this season of Clone Wars, which a lot of people forget about. But that's it. Ahsoka's arc with the younglings. They travel to Ilum to get their kyber crystals. That was so cool to see. I think that was so deserving to see how that process works because it's expanded on other projects as well, like Fallen Order. You see it, well, not directly, but you see mentions of it. You get to see it so many other times. It's so cool to see that about how a Jedi's training like basically traditionally starts. Then you have the D Squad arc, which it's funny. I mean, it's kind of just there about how a squad of droids come together and defeat an entire battalion of B1 droid army. But then Maul controlling Mandalore is the highlights of the season for me until he eventually gets stopped by Palpatine as a threat to his power, which basically enlightens Maul's character to a point. It kills Savage Opressed, which is another that's another arc to his character, even though we don't really see it much because Son of Dathomir is not in animation. And then there's the Ahsoka betrayed arc, where Ahsoka ends up leaving the Jedi Order. We needed to see that because why is Ahsoka not in Revenge of the Sith? You know,
Yep.
and it was, I think that story of how Ahsoka ends up leaving the timeline is just done so perfectly. Everything between her and Barriss, even though I don't consider Barriss a very likable character. She does also she's also close to Ahsoka, as we see in earlier seasons. So her being a betrayer, to me, I just think is really cool. And that's it. Andor season 1, we're getting to the seasons for me that I consider like perfect, like beyond perfect in and of themselves. The only thing that I hold against Andor season 1, even though not saying it's like bad, I don't really consider seeing Cassian's flashbacks. I don't consider that to be outright important, even though like we needed to see where he came from, but like I guess like cool, okay, Cassian's adopted from a tribe. Okay, that's fine. But that's the only thing of the season that I think that we didn't need to see. Starting at episode 3 and beyond, I think is just a remarkable story of not only Cassian, but about how the roots of the rebellion are starting. Because this season takes place around the same time as the beginning of Rebels does, which is something that not a lot of people think about. And then all the ISB stuff, the prison arc, seeing how Cassian is like actually in the Empire's grips. They just don't know it because he's so good at being undercover. I think everything about, and then this season has some of the highest peaks in Star Wars, specifically the Eye, One Way Out, and also to a certain extent Rick's Road as well. I think they're the highest peaks that we see, specifically in the original trilogy, the Age of the Empire, at least in Star Wars, and that's why I hold this season in such a high standard. The writing is so good, the acting is beyond incredible. Yep. Mandalorian season 1 and 2, I think I think they have certain flaws in their plots, but I wouldn't consider them flaws, more so preferences that some people enjoy and some people don't. The reason why I value season 2 a little higher is because I consider its plot a lot more fluid. Even though I don't necessarily dislike season 1's plot, there are some episodes where it's like, okay, like he rescues the child after episode 3, which, you know, that first part is like beyond incredible. We discover that this child is, you know, susceptible to the sensitive to the Force and whatnot. And then he just like tries to go in hiding. That doesn't work. He tries to get work. He tries to go back to being a bounty hunter. That doesn't really work. He tries to do a job with outlaws. That also does not work. And then all of a sudden we get introduced to Moff Gideon, which of course, you know, for me, the last 2 episodes to me are the highlight of the season. I think that the world building, the character building, I think it's done really well. But I think even though I consider this season a 10 out of 10 personally, I also think that there could be a little sprinkles that they could have made the sort of development of the plot a little more fluid. Take that into sense what you will, but that's what I'll say about that. For me, the season, the flow of the season just feels like a little choppy. And even though season 2, you could consider the plot repetitive and whatnot, but he discovers a character at the beginning that he's like, oh, you're not a Mandalorian, you can't be wearing this armor. But he discovers that a man of honor can be a man of worthiness. He discovers Bo-Katan, who challenges his belief in Mandalorian society. He confronts Ahsoka, who offers him a different perspective of raising of Grogu, and then Grogu gets captured, He discovers another man that considers himself a Mandalorian. He proves it from his chain code. And then The Believer, I think, is also a really fantastic episode. Seeing he doesn't necessarily know about Mayfeld's past outside of just being an Imperial. But then he discovers Operation Cinder, why he left, and how the Empire. Not everybody in the Empire doesn't really believe. I'm sort of rambling on. I've been talking so long, but they don't necessarily believe in all of the Empire's beliefs. And then Luke Skywalker's Grand Return, I think, is just a branch into the higher Mandoverse that we're sort of branching into more and more with Book of Boba Fett, with Ahsoka and whatnot.
Yeah.
And it's all going to be concluded in Heir to the Empire and Mandalorian and Grogu, which I think is going to be really cool. I think this season, all in all, basically perplexes Mando's character in a sense of where he has, in Mando season 1, he's sort of like a strict guy. He has one set of rules. He sort of like gets a little branch because he meets this child that he cares for, and he knows that he was once a child that needed saving, so why not do it for this one too? And then now he meets characters that challenges his way of thinking from the past, which I think I just value that so highly, and that's why I rate it so. And it's done, and it's fan service done so well too. So
Yeah. By the way, I don't think season 2 is bad. It's number 6 for me, but personally, I have a few above it. So my top 5. My number 5 is Rebel season 3. My number 4 is Clone Wars season 4. My number 3 is Andor. My number 2 is Clone Wars season 5, and my number 1 is Mando season 1. So, starting at number 5 with Rebel season 3. I think this is far and away the best season, personally, of Rebels. We get our introduction to Thrawn into canon, which is amazing. He has done very, very well in this season, and in season 4. The finale is really great. Super underrated finale. Personally, I think the season 3 finale is really good. Everything with Maul is really great. The stuff with the dark side arc with Ezra and his development with that, and then the Darksaber stuff with Sabine, she gets development. Kanan gets development from Bendu. Honestly, the only person who doesn't really get anything is Zeb in this season, if I remember correctly. He kind of gets forgotten after season 2. But I think this season just generally embodies all the really great things about Rebels. Um, Twin Sons, great episode. That episode lives in my head rent free constantly. I think this is a really great season. And that's not to say season 2 or 4 are bad. They're all about the same for me, but this one really kicks it up a notch. My 4 is Clone Wars season 4, which you talked about a little bit. This season is really consistent in my opinion. It's very consistently good. I'd say the water arc is kind of the only thing that is not great. But the Zygerian arc, personally, I really like that one. I like how it challenges Anakin's temper. I like what it does with Obi-Wan and Rex and Ahsoka. I think it's a good episode, or a good arc. Umbara, obviously, that's a top 5 arc for me personally. And then Undercover Kenobi arc, everyone loves that one. Really, really great stuff with Anakin, and the stuff with Cad Bane and Obi-Wan, and that final episode is really good. And then our introduction to Maul. Well, not introduction to Maul, but introduction to Maul. We see him for the first time. In the finale, last 2 episodes, and I think that is done pretty well. So this season overall just has pretty consistently above average episodes, so that's why it's here for me. My number 3 is Andor, which is probably not a surprise to most people. Andor is a very good show. It's a slow burn for sure, but especially once you get past those first two episodes. I think the rest of the season is stellar, and the peaks are some of the highest peaks in Star Wars. I think, um, personally, Rick's Road, the finale, is it's in my top three of highest Star Wars peaks. With the speech, and the uprising, it's done very well. The prison stuff is very good with Andy Serkis. Um, the heist arc is really great, and I sort of like that this show has arcs sort of akin to Clone Wars in a way. I think this show is done really well. There's not much I can say that other people haven't said a lot better. Um, Really great show. Not too much to complain about. Um, in my number two, I have Clone Wars season 5, which I think we both can agree is the best season of the show. The only thing that is kind of mid is the droid arc, which it's not horrible, but it's definitely mid. Um, we clown on it a lot. It's not great. But
It is funny though.
everything, yeah, it is funny. Everything else is amazing. I think the pilot episode with Maul is great. I mean, I love to see Maul, so it's always good to see Maul. It sets him up to kind of where he's gonna go for that great arc he has later. The Ilum Padawan arc is with Ahsoka is really good. More Ahsoka development. Um, and then the Maul arc, I think, as well, is the peak. Probably my second favorite arc in the show. Only behind Siege of Mandalore. I'm a big Maul guy, so I really enjoy that arc. But I think that that whole those three episodes are really really great. Um, and then the finale arc is Ahsoka Framed, which I think is really great, and it sets up sets more of Anakin's fall to the dark side and being disgruntled with the Jedi, as well as explaining Ahsoka out of the plot for Revenge of the Sith. Dang, um,
Yeah.
I think they were gonna end the show here, unfortunately, since they sold it, and I think that would have been a fine ending. We got season 6, so they could finish up the episodes they were already developing, um, which I think was kind of poetic. It started with Yoda, ended with Yoda, but that's besides the point. Season
Yeah.
5, super super high heights. Really just phenomenal Star Wars all around. And my number one is The Mandalorian season 1. For me, this is a perfect season. I don't think anything could be changed in the season to make it better. We start off. The first 3 episodes are sort of an arc on their own. We get Mando sort of coming to see his humanity a little bit more, and put his trust in other people. Um, he befriends obviously Grogu, and I think episode 3 specifically is really great. And then the coven protects him and lets him escape. And then episode 4, 5, and 6, I think are the ones that people complain about a lot. I really don't have a problem with them because I think every episode in the story naturally leads on to the next. I think episode 4 is great. Introduces Cara Dune. He's gonna try to settle down there. That doesn't end up panning out because he realizes, hey, there's a target on my head and the kid, so I can't really do this. I gotta leave. He goes. He ends up on Tatooine. That doesn't pan out. He learns that he can't trust people, which further sends him down his negative path. Um, and then episode 6, which is personally probably my favorite episode of the season. It really shows the great dynamics of these characters, and how far Mando has come. I think episode 6 is really great. He gets like some cool Batman takedowns toward the end too, which is pretty good. I think, um, off the top of my head, yeah, I think this middle section is a lot better than a lot of people give it credit for. It really sets the stage for each episode going forward, and develops all our characters. The finale, it's not quite as good as the season 2 finale. It's serviceable. Moff Gideon is sort of shoehorned in, which is sort of a negative thing, but I can look past it. Um, the stuff with IG-11 is pretty good. IG-11 and Grogu, and Queel. good finale. I like the stuff where he takes off his helmet. Yeah, honestly, I could go on about season one, but honestly, I think it's perfect. I will rewatch it at any point. I think it's great acting, great storytelling, and I have nothing to complain about. 10 out of 10s. Um, yeah,
Yep, and that is going to be the end of our ranking. We have been yapping about Star Wars shows
we
for an
have,
hour and a half.
we
Yeah,
have.
crazy. Now, that's going to be the end of our main segment. If you've been if you watched all the way through, let us know if you're on YouTube. Let us know in the comments whether which list you agree with more. We'd love to hear your thoughts if you are there. But let me throw you guys back to yesterday where we filmed our short segments. We will see you all later.
Short segment. See ya.